These fallen watchers knew the secrets of all things. At this time, sin was great on the earth. The wicked angels killed many people and begat giants with mortal women. The wicked former angels consumed everything that the earth produced. The great fish, the birds in the sky, all the fruit of the earth and all kinds of grain. The fruit of the trees, even beasts and reptiles they committed sin against, all the creeping things of the earth. They observed and watched all earthly things. They performed every harsh deed with harsh utterance upon male and female creation and upon humanity itself. 200 angels had been persuaded to leave heaven for the earth. The 200 angels seized 200 donkeys, 200 asses, 200 sheep, and rams of the flock, 200 goats, 200 beasts of the field from every animal and from every bird, for experiments and all types of mischievation. The monsters sought out flesh, which would be destroyed or perverted. Monsters and giants would arise who were lacking in true knowledge because they were abominations. Meantime, the earth grew more and more corrupt, the giants more mighty. They considered trying to persuade other angels to come upon the earth. Otherwise, their tyranny might ultimately perish and die. All the time, they were causing great corruption in the earth. If this aim did not suffice to perpetuate them, they would be finally destroyed, they believed. The fallen ones defiled all creation and begat giants and monstrous creatures and corrupted all the earth, which was defiled by bloodshedding at the hand of the giants. But this did not suffice them, and they were seeking all the time to devour, destroy many much more. The giants attacked all creation. Later, the scribe Enoch gave one of the giants a copy of another tablet that bore his own handwriting. The writing on the tablet said, "In the name of the great and holy God, this message is sent to Shemihaza and all his companions. Let it be known to you, all the giants, that you will not escape judgment for all the things that you've done, and your wives, their sons, and the wives of their sons will not escape, and that by your evil deeds on the earth there has been visited upon you a heavenly judgment. The land is crying out and complaining about you and the deeds of your children and about the harm you have done to it. Behold, destruction is coming."
Welcome back to Covenants and Kingdoms. Happy to be with you. My name is Brad, and with me as always,
Nathan. I'm Nathan. Hi. How are you?
Man, that was a wild story.
Yeah.
Up. Where was that from?
Everybody likes talking about giants.
Yeah, giants
right?
are cool.
Yeah,
giants are cool. So where did we find that story?
That's from the Book of the Giants. It was discovered at the Dead Sea Scrolls material, and it postdates the Book of Enoch because it alludes to the book of First Enoch, references First Enoch.
Right.
So it has to be after that. First Enoch's probably maybe 2nd century BC, so this is between their 2nd and 1st century BC.
Yeah.
So whoever wrote it, probably a compilation of people, whoever wrote it knew about First Enoch, and so they kind of expand. So First Enoch's kind of an expansion of Genesis 6 and the story afterwards, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then this is an expansion of the actual giants. So today we're going to talk about giants,
which is
partly. Well, there's a lot of other stuff we're going to talk about,
but giants or Nephilim is it's a popular topic.
Yeah, there's lots of people.
It's also very controversial.
Yes,
as well.
The only reason we would ever hesitate is 'cause, we don't want to ever ruffle feathers or hurt feelings or shake or rock the boat. I'm not a rock the boat guy, but we also like to talk about what the Bible says.
Exactly,
and we're going to go into detail about some of these peoples and this story in Genesis 14. We're going to start at Genesis 14.
Yeah,
continue the story of Abram, and so this has to do with these peoples that we're going to talk about. So we'll get into it.
And as always, we're brought to you by Baba Java Coffee. Located in the Birmingham area, we have 3 cafes, plus we roast our own coffee. We get specialty coffee from all around the world. We have some great partners at the farm level bringing in specialty grade coffee. And those of you who are listeners of this show can go to our website at babajavacoffee.com and use the promo code Covenants to get 10% off your order.
Great. Yeah. Take advantage of that.
Yeah. It's a great deal.
10% is a good deal.
It is. depending on where you are, it could at least save you tax.
That's true.
Nice.
That's true.
All right, so let's get into it, Nathan. Where are we starting?
All right, we're going to continue our narrative of Abram and his passage. Yeah. We didn't read the rest of chapter 12 and chapter 13. That was about Abram going to Egypt. It's important. It's all important. And then the story of Abram and Lot. We'll get into Lot a little bit in chapter 14, so we'll talk about that just a little bit, sure. Kind of refer back to it. But let's read Genesis 14.
All right.
In the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Shadorla Omer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim. These kings made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shimber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. And all these joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. 12 years, verse 4, 12 years they had served Shadorla Omer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Shadorla Omer and the kings who were with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Estroth Kernaim, the Zuzim and Ham, the Amim and Shaveh Kiriataim, and the Horites in their hill country of Seir as far as El Paran on the border of the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is Kadesh, and defeated all the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites who were dwelling at Hazazon Tamar. Then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that's Zoar, went out. They joined battle at the valley of Siddim with Shadorla Omer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, and as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, some fell into them, and the rest fled to the hill country. So the enemies took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went on their way. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and their possessions and went their way. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all their possessions and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions, and the women and the people.
Wow. That'd be a pretty bad way to die, to fall into a tar pit.
Yeah. Yes, it would. Yes, it would. I mean, you've seen TV shows and movies about it and stuff, but yeah, it looks like a pretty horrible way to die.
Just really slow.
The only ones we have that I know of in the U.S. are in the
West.
In California.
Yeah, that's right. California.
La Brea tar pits are the ones I know about.
Yeah.
So anyway.
All right, so we have this story here of Genesis 14. We have these kings coming together, fighting.
So we have 4 kings. Yeah. So Shadorla Omer, we're going to call him King C, because it's just hard to say.
Yeah,
right?
It is.
So we're going to call him King C and his allies. So it's him and his 3 allies against these 5 other kings.
Yeah.
Right? So this is the first recorded war between nations that we see in the Bible, right? Yeah. What's interesting is that the names of these kings, we've seen it in archaeological findings. As a matter of fact, there's 3 tablets in the British Museum that have their names and some of the wars and things that happened with them. So we're going to read some of those inscriptions here in just a little bit. Obviously, they're translated, but we're going to read some of those, okay? In verse 1, we have that alliance of the 4 kings and King C.
Yeah.
He's the king of Elam, all right? King of Elam is east of the Tigris River. Okay. Elam is kind of where Persia, Iran would be today.
Gotcha.
Okay? So he had these other vassal kings. So he had Arioch, the king of Elasar, Tidal, the king, it says king of nations, which is Goyim, right? And Amraphel, the king of Shinar. And we've talked about Shinar before. Okay? Shinar is kind of the another word for Mesopotamia, like southern Mesopotamia. Okay? In Genesis 10:10, Shinar is described as, it has 4 cities. So this was the kingdom of this guy named Nimrod in Genesis 10, right? Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, right?
Correct.
So we have these artifacts that actually mention these 3 kings. We talked about that. They're King C, Arioch, and Tidal, king of nations, okay? So we don't know exactly when they were written. They could have been written before, they could have been written after. But anyway, it kind of describes and it shows like the wars that happened between the city-states and things. Some of them are vassals, some of them are allies, some of them are enemies. So we're gonna talk about that.
When you say before, you mean before the biblical?
Before the biblical account. Well, most people think the tablets are after the biblical account.
Okay, gotcha.
But it kind of describes what's happening.
Yeah.
So this King C is controlling a lot of the land. He has allies, maybe they're vassals. We don't really know. So let's read the first artifact. The first artifact says this: the property and the possessions of Babylon, small and great, and their faithful counsel to Kuder Lagamo, that's King C. Okay. King of the land of Elam. I am a king, the son of the king, the son of a daughter of the king, who on the throne of dominion have sat. Dursirilani, the son of Arioch, Ariuka is what it says, who with the spoil of the throne of dominion sat, and with the sword was killed. Okay? So just in the Bible, we see these two guys, King C, right? He's the king of Elam, and then we see Arioch. So it talks about Dursirilani, who is the king, the son of the king of Arioch. Of King Arioch. Mm-hmm. Okay? So Arioch must have died because it's talking about Dursirilani, right? So the king of Shinar, which included Babylon, just like it says in the Bible, was closely allied with King C. Okay. It also appears that the king of Shinar may have been like a vassal of King C. All right. So instead of King Arioch, so Arioch must have died. So this must have been after this battle, right? That's why most people think that. Dursirilani, his son, the king, is killed. All right. So the city of Elisar, which Arioch's son ruled over, is believed to be the city of Larsa today. Okay. The second artifact reads as follows: the enemy, the Elamite, King C, multiplied evils against Bel and Babil, which he planned evil against. There he set his mind on destroying the temple. The enemy, the Elamite, took its goods. He decreed its destruction. He showed his dislike for and barred the people of Bel of Azitha, the road to Sumer, who is Kuder Lagamo, that's King C, the maker of this evil. He has gathered the Umanmanda, and the people of Bel he has ruined. The Elamite caused his yoke to be directed down to Borsippa. He set his face against, and he traversed also the road of darkness, the road to Mesku. The wicked man, the Elamite, destroyed its palace. The princes he subdued with the sword, and from all the temples he carried off their goods as spoils of war and took them back to Elam. Okay?
So this is describing King C. Seems like he's just being a bad dude.
Yeah. So because he's the enemy of this guy that's writing the tablet, right? So he's talking about these areas of around Babylon. So it calls Babylon Babil, just like it does in the Bible in Genesis 10 and Genesis 11, right? Yeah. It shows King C's tendency to gather an alliance and attack those that he thought were being disloyal to him. And then he takes his enemy's spoils by force, just like he did in Genesis 14. Yeah, exactly. All right. So that's what he's doing. The same thing he did in Genesis 14. It's described in this tablet here. All right.
That's cool.
Here's the third artifact. This one's interesting. Samas, who's the Babylonian sun god. Okay. The illuminator of Merodach, the chief Marduk.
Yeah, Marduk.
The chief Babylonian god. The rulers who were not nourishing, he caused to be slain. Dursilani, the son of Arioch, right? His goods he carried off to the waters of Babylon and back to the temple of Esagil. His son, with the weapon of his hands, like a lamb he was slaughtered. The child he cut off, Tidal, son of Gaza. His goods he carried off to the waters of Babylon and to the temple of Esagil. His son, with the weapon of his hands, fell upon him, of his dominion before the temple of Anuit. Okay, it could be Sipar Anuit. Elam, the city of Ahe, to the land of Rabatu. He spoiled in ruins. He set the fortress of Akkad, the whole of Borsippa. Ended Kulargamal, that's King C, his son, and with the steel sword he pierced his heart, his enemy. He took the will of these kings, the lords of sin, the rebellions, and the chief gods Marduk brought his anger against. Okay? So this is talking. This actually mentions two of those Babylonian gods. Yeah. Okay, Shamash, and Marduk. All right. So they confirm the names of Arioch, Tidal, and King C, but they also confirm the rebellion Before the rebellion, the king of Shinar, Babylon, was allied with all three of them. So after all these years of war, King C and his allies needed what? So, all right, okay, you got King C. He's from Elam, from the east of the Tigris River, right? So he has allies and vassals, which means he controls, and vassals pay tribute to the king. So they give him money. They give him a certain amount of money. He agrees to not kill them, to protect them, and to be in alliance with them if they'll just give him money.
Yeah.
All right, that's what happens. So he does that to these people in Mesopotamia. All right, Shinar and these other kings in these city-states. Right. So, but there's lots of people that rebel all the time. There's constant warfare. And when you have constant warfare, when you have people fighting, what do you need? You need food. You need supplies. You need, weapons and things like that. So that costs money. All right.
Of course.
So how do they raise money? They can't just, they don't have the same capital system that we do now.
Well, you have to go to your constituents, essentially, or your or the people you rule over, and get more taxes, more.
Either that, or they typically, what they did was they would just conquer more lands and get more tribute.
That's also possible.
And take off the spoil.
Yeah.
That's what King C decided he was going to do. He needed to propagate his wars, all these wars that he's doing. He needed money to support their conquering habit. So there's no currency. You can't just sell bonds.
Right.
You can't just start new businesses. You can't raise capital. So what they have to do is they decide to go west and take tribute and take spoil from the lands that they conquer. All right?
So that's where he was saying Gaza.
Well, Gaza was a name. Yeah, and that tablet,
the son of Gaza.
It's somebody's name.
Sorry,
It's somebody's name.
But he went to Elam.
Yeah, Elam.
The city of Ahi.
Yeah, so that's going to be these are all Mesopotamia.
Yeah, so he went to all these different lands.
Yeah.
Tried to conquer them.
Some of them he did, some of them he didn't.
Exactly.
Again, so before he was doing the same thing. He had built these alliances. There's constant warfare. He needs more money. So what does he do? He can't go east. He controls all of Mesopotamia, or a lot of it.
Yeah.
Or has alliances and vassals. So he decides to go west. So he goes west with his allies. That's where these kings come in, right?
Gotcha.
And he decides that he's going to conquer them, take tribute, and take spoils. Okay, so he does. So at first it's the tribute system. You say, "Hey, I'm conquering you. You have to you're my vassal now. I'll let you live, but you have to give me money."
Yeah.
All right. So that's what they do. That's what he does with Sodom and Gomorrah, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, and these other lands in the valley of Siddim there. Okay. So on the way, all right. So he's from Elam. He has allies with people in Mesopotamia. They go west. What's between what Iraq is today and where we're talking about the city-state of Israel, Palestine? What's between there?
Modern day?
Modern day.
Jordan. Yeah.
So.
And the Jordan River.
So he is Elam, Mesopotamia, and then he marches west through what is modern-day Jordan, Transjordan. And as he goes to Transjordan, he encounters these people that we're going to talk about. All right?
Something else I thought was interesting in this tablet, which hopefully Matt can put on the screen because it's really cool.
Oh, yeah.
So when you see these tablets, because you mentioned in episode 1 about cuneiform and how they use the reeds, and you can actually see the impressions.
Yeah, they're clay tablets. Yeah. And it looks like they're just reeds, and they push them in different ways. It looks like chicken scratch. It's like chickens kind of walking on it.
How does that become a language? And number 2, how is that translated? Who translated that? Anyway, very interesting.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting in that description was how it talks about Marduk and Samas as it personalizes them as if they're real, because we know they are real. But they are talking about them as if they actually exist.
That's right.
Not that it's just an ethereal thing.
Right.
Anyway, it's just interesting.
Yeah, it's not abstract. They're talking about like they're
abstract,
they're real entities.
Yeah, exactly.
They believe they were.
Exactly.
Right? So he's marching west, and he encounters and conquers the Rephaim, the Zuzim, the Emim, the Amorites, and the Horites.
Yep.
The Horim. Okay? So all these different peoples he conquers, and it's no accident that he mentions them all in a row there.
Yeah.
Okay? Fi Fo Fum. We are talking about giants.
Like the Green Giant?
No.
Jack and the Beanstalk?
No. Real live.
The New York football giants?
Well, maybe. Real giants.
Real giants.
We start with Nephilim. Now, we notice in this passage of Genesis, he doesn't talk about Nephilim.
No, he doesn't.
Right?
No.
But we start with the Nephilim because the Nephilim started all of these other groups. And we're going to see that as we walk through the Bible about how that is, okay? We're gonna go through a lot of Bible passages here, okay? Genesis 6, 1 through 4, one of the most controversial passages in the Bible, okay? Why is that? Because a lot of people want to read non-supernatural things into supernatural events, all right?
Why don't we read it?
Yeah, let's read it. Genesis 6.
When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. They were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown.
Okay. So, many modern theologians pay little attention to this passage and interpret it in like a supernatural view. Okay,
Yeah.
They view that the sons of God. Okay, and the Hebrew is B'nai Ha-Elohim. B'nai Ha-Elohim. We've talked about that.
We have
many times. B'nai Ha-Elohim refers to a kingly line or to what's called Sethite, the Sethite view. Okay. However, the traditional view of many pre-Christian and what's called Second Temple period Jews believe that the sons of God were these spiritual beings, took human wives and produced Nephilim, these giants, okay? This view has become a lot less popular today, as you can imagine, due to our modern aversion to the supernatural. We've talked about that in many episodes. We're going to keep talking about that.
Yeah.
Modern Christianity may be reluctant to embrace this view, okay? But what about God? Okay, the high God becoming a man, being in a woman, developing as a human, being delivered, and walking on the earth. Is that any less weird than saying that these other spiritual entities came and had giant babies?
It's not.
It's not less weird. So if we believe in the virgin birth, which we do, I mean, that's fundamental to our Christian belief system, right?
Correct.
Rock solid theology, no problem. We all believe that. No true Christian would not believe that.
Exactly.
Right? But we say, oh no, that has to be, they're talking about men. It sounds like it sounds like mythology.
Yeah.
It does.
Well, it does sound like
sound like mythology. But it's true. The Bible talks about it. And we're going to, the people in the Bible believed it at the time. The people in the Second Temple period believed it. The people wrote about it. They wrote commentaries about it.
Yeah.
First Enoch is a commentary. That's what it is. First Enoch, the book of First Enoch, is a commentary about Genesis 6:1, what happened about that, and what happened to the angels. And we're going to see that even Paul, Peter, and Jesus' brother Jude believed all these things, and they wrote about them. And we're going to see those passages where they actually
in the New Testament too.
Wow, can you believe that?
That's amazing.
They talked about it, and we're gonna talk about just a few of those passages.
Yeah.
We're gonna touch on that. Okay. Even the mighty and great theologian John Calvin,
I'm a big fan.
called this view absurd.
Yeah,
which it does. On the surface, it seems absurd.
Yeah.
Again, he's from the Enlightenment period,
He is.
right? Post-Enlightenment period. So it's just one of those things that we, as modern thinkers, because we don't see things, we've talked about these. We believe in high spiritual stuff. We believe in physical stuff, but we don't believe in that middle area where there's these other spirituals, where there's this other spiritual things and other spiritual entities happening, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, let's talk about some of these arguments. Why the phrase sons of God, it doesn't mean people.
Humans.
It just doesn't mean human people.
Right.
It means spiritual entities. Yeah. Okay? B'nai Elohim. We've talked about this several times. We're going to mention some of these again. They're spiritual beings. Okay? So Psalm 89, we read this before, but we're going to read it again. Let the heavens praise your wonders, O God, your faithfulness in the assembly of the holy ones. That's Kedoshim, that's spiritual beings. For who in the skies can be compared to the Lord? Who among the heavenly beings, those are spiritual entities.
Yep.
And what's the Hebrew word? B'nai Elohim.
B'nai.
The same words it says in Genesis 6, okay?
So it's using B'nai Elohim for heavenly beings,
just like sons of God.
Interesting.
We again, sons of God is an English translation of
exactly.
B'nai Elohim.
Yeah.
Right? Heavenly beings is an English translation of B'nai Elohim.
Yeah.
Right? The way it was written originally. Okay? All right, next.
A great God. A God greatly to be feared in the council of the holy ones.
In the council of the holy ones, Kedoshim.
Okay.
And awesome above all who are around him. O Lord, God of hosts. That's talking about Elohe Tzevaot. Psalm 97:7. All gods call Elohim, bow before him. Psalm 135:5. Yahweh is above all gods, call Elohim. Deuteronomy. He's the God of gods. Elohe Elohim. God is the God of gods. Okay. Solomon declared, 1 Kings 8:23, Solomon declares there is no God, Elohim, like him on earth. 1 Chronicles, he's great God, Elohim. All gods, Elohim. Psalm 86:8, Elohim, Be Elohim. Psalm 95:3, Psalm 96:4, Psalm 136:2. Give thanks to the God of gods, Elohe le-Elohe ha-Elohim. Psalm 29:1-2, ascribe to the Lord, O heavenly beings, B'nai Elohim. The same thing it says in Genesis 6. These sons of God are worshiping him, right? And we've already talked many times about Psalm 82. God, Elohim, has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the Elohim, he holds judgment. Okay, and then down at the bottom, arise, O God. Okay, verse 6, it says, I said you are
gods,
Elohim, sons, B'nai of Elion, the Most High. Nevertheless, like man, you will die. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for you shall inherit the nations, right? Deuteronomy 32:8-9. We've talked about this many times. When the Most High, Elion, gave the nations their inheritance, he divided all mankind, thinking, of course, he set the boundaries for the peoples according to the number of the sons of God, B'nai Elohim. B'nai Elohim does not mean men.
No.
In the Bible, over and over again, Elohim and B'nai Elohim are terms that mean these spiritual beings. Okay? It just does. Sorry. If that hurts your feelings, I'm sorry. But it just does. Okay? Okay, let's contrast that with sons of God with man. Okay, B'nai Elohim, the Hebrew word for man is Adam, right? And we've seen that over and over again in the Bible, many, many times. Adam means man. Son of man, B'nai Adam.
Or Adam.
Sons of man. Adam, yeah.
Yeah.
Sons of man, B'nai Adam. Ben Adam, son of man. Okay? And then Adam, man, right?
Correct.
Nothing in the text, Genesis 6, suggests that some of these men were having children in Genesis 6:1. It doesn't say Adam.
No, it doesn't.
It says B'nai Elohim, right?
Yep.
The sons of God.
Right.
They're contrasted with man. Okay, so it's distinct from man. All right, so they're non-human beings. These are spiritual beings. Okay. Okay, this is a weird one. So it describes these women in verse 2. Okay, when Adam began to multiply on the face of the earth, face of the land, and daughters were born to them. Okay. V'yara b'nei ha-Elohim, the sons of God, then saw that these banot, these women, banot, these daughters, were attractive, tovot. Okay? It says, ki tovot. Okay? The daughters of man, all right? So it says, B'nai Elohim et banot ha'adam, the daughters of men, ki, that they were tovot. They were
beautiful.
Good. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Tov means good,
Yeah.
but it's like attractive, beautiful.
Gotcha.
Right? That's what it says,
Yeah.
okay? So if that was talking about men, so the godly men thought that the ungodly women were beautiful, but they didn't think the godly women were beautiful.
Right.
Okay? But the opposite didn't occur either. The ungodly men didn't think the godly women were beautiful. So it just doesn't make logical sense.
No, it doesn't make sense.
That
right.
they only saw that these women were beautiful. These ungodly women were beautiful. Okay? It's just not logical if you say that these Sethites or these kings only saw these, unless it's like I can't have those. So, one of those type things. All right?
But it doesn't mention that at all.
No, it doesn't say that at all.
No.
Okay. Immediately after this intermarriage, it talks about God says he will judge man because he is flesh, basar. Okay? Hu basar. He is flesh. Okay? And his days shall be 120 days. All right? They're mortal. They're flesh. Hu basar. He is flesh. Okay? He's basar, flesh or meat. Okay? That's what it means. Okay. All right? And therefore decreases their lifespan 120 years. All right? It's talking specifically about these men are judged because of something.
Yeah.
Because they're only flesh. And that they are trying to do something different than being like normal flesh. Okay? So there's this judgment that occurs. All right? They're trying to become more than normal human flesh and try to live forever. Mm-hmm. So what they're trying to do is propagate their line to live forever. So that's why God judges them and makes it only 120 years. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? They're trying to be more than flesh and be immortal. Okay? They're trying to create this line so it's not just humans, it's B'nai Elohim. Okay? Yeah. They're spiritual beings. All right? Okay. Let's stop there for just a minute. God's intention was God, the Elohim, Yahweh, created men.
Yeah.
Okay, to be his image bearers. So it doesn't make any sense that he would judge these people if they were just men doing the same thing that God wanted them to do. He said, be fruitful and multiply and subdue the earth, right? Yeah. He told them to do that. He commanded them, I command you to do that, but not like that.
Yeah.
Right? That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
What does make logical sense is that these spiritual entities who are not God, who are not the creator, who are not supposed to be doing this, are trying to create their own line of imagers. Yeah. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So that's why they're judged. That's why it's wrong, because men are flesh, but these spiritual entities are trying to create their own imagers instead of God. Okay?
I mean, Psalm 82 alludes to this.
Right.
That's right. Really
exactly. Just like Psalm 82. Yeah. All right? They're just overstepping their bounds. They're trying to create their own image bearers to subvert and destroy, as we see in that the passage from the Book of Giants. They destroy all kind of flesh, and they're trying to subdue the earth, and instead of the image makers that God made, who commanded them to subdue the earth.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So what happens? So now we get to what's the result of these fallen beings.
So it says
intermarrying with humans.
That the result of these are the Nephilim. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're talking about all that. So we've established they are spiritual beings.
Yeah,
they're doing something against. They're trying to make their own image bearers instead of what God wanted His image bearers to subdue, to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. But these spiritual entities decided, no, we want our image bearers to be fruitful, multiply, and subdue the earth. Okay, so what happened is these Nephilim came, and the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, translate them as gigantes.
Ooh, yeah.
Giants.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how it translates it. Gigantes here. All right. So there's these mighty men, Gibborim. Okay, that's the Hebrew, is Gibborim, the men of renown. It doesn't say how they got there. Okay, it just says they were on the earth in those days and also afterward. Okay, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them. Why are these Nephilim mentioned in the same passage as the intermarriage of the sons of God? Because they are the result of the intermarriage of these spiritual entities, these B'nai Elohim, with the daughters of men. Okay,
it makes sense. You have a fallen spiritual being intermarrying with humans. It's not going to be a normal child.
No, they're these Nephilim.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, modern theologians don't like this.
No.
Because it sounds like mythology, right?
Yeah.
It does. It really does. I mean, I would 100% agree with that. But do you want to follow Joe Schmo, who is a theologian at First Baptist in wherever, Alabama? Or do you want to follow Jude, the brother of Jesus, Peter, the number one disciple of Jesus, and Paul, the apostle to the Gentiles, who Jesus called personally.
Probably
Do you think their theology of those three guys is a little bit it supersedes Pastor Joe Schmo of First Baptist in Nowhere, Alabama?
Probably. And just for the record, we go to Baptist church. So.
Oh yeah, no. Whatever. This could be any denomination.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are Baptists, so we can make fun of Baptists.
Exactly. Right.
Right.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So let's read some of these passages and see how they interpreted it. So, and they're actually alluding to the book of First Enoch. Okay. Well, Paul's not, but the other two are talking about the events that happen in the book of First Enoch.
Wait, you're saying New Testament authors referenced non-biblical sources?
Can you imagine that?
Man.
And we still consider them canonical.
Yeah.
I can't believe that.
It's amazing.
All right, read 2 Peter. Let's read 2 Peter 2.
All right. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment. If he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly. If by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes, he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly. So the part we're specifically on is the angels, quote unquote.
So, all right. So Greek doesn't have as many words for these spiritual beings as Hebrew does. Yeah. In Hebrew, we're not going to get into all the different things. Read some of Michael Heiser's stuff. There's this any of Michael Heiser's book about angels, Michael Heiser's book about demons, Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm. There's many of them. He goes he mentions these and talks about the differences in the Hebrew and the Greek. Anyway, there's lots of words that describe spiritual entities in Hebrew. There's not that many in Greek. So a lot of times it's translated angelos, angels. Mm-hmm. All right, so that's what he's talking about. For God did not spare angels. That's these B'nai Elohim. When they sinned, we just talked about how they sinned.
Yeah.
In the book of Enoch talks about how these fallen watchers, these B'nai Elohim came down. It describes it expands on Genesis 6, and then their punishment was they were going to be chained. These spiritual entities lost their place in the heavenly realm. They were chained in Tartarus, because in chains of gloomy darkness until their judgment. And their judgment is going to be they're going to die. Psalm 82, they're going to die. Yeah. They're going to be thrown into the lake of fire. In Revelation, it describes that in great detail. Okay?
So that's just for clarity for everyone listening. That section there, cast them into hell, committed them to chains of gloomy darkness. That's Peter quoting Enoch.
That's Peter quoting First Enoch. Yeah. All right. So the events that happened in First Enoch, Peter's saying that's what happened.
Yeah.
Okay. He believes that.
Yep.
I'll take Peter's word over Pastor Joe Schmo. Okay. Jude. All right. Jude didn't believe in Jesus
initially. Yeah, you're right.
And then after the resurrection, he believed.
Yeah.
Okay. He saw his brother glorified standing there.
Yeah.
Okay. So is that going to make you believe?
For sure.
Yeah. So he believed. All right. And he wrote the Epistle of Jude. Right.
Yep.
What does he say?
And the angels who did not stay within their own position of authority, but left their proper dwelling, he has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding cities, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desire, serve as an example by undergoing a punishment of eternal fire. That's interesting because he's comparing these fallen beings to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah who both exchanged their natural desires for unnatural ones.
Both Peter and Jude are talking, it says almost exactly the same thing that Peter says.
Yeah.
And Peter talks about Sodom and Gomorrah too, and he's talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's this unnatural, against God's order that they're being punished for. Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities of Siddim, we just talked about. It's Siddim. It's the cities of the plain of Siddim. We just talked about that in Genesis 14. Uh-huh. They were punished because of their unnatural desires. They did things outside of God's will, and he punished them, right? And so these again, the Greek translates it as angels. They didn't stay with their own position of authority. They left their dwelling, and now they are under chains of gloomy darkness until the judgment, just like what Peter said.
Exactly.
And so Jude, the brother of Jesus, is quoting is alluding to First Enoch.
Yep.
Okay, so both Peter and Jude are. All right. This one's a little weirder, and people don't. But people agree with both of those that they're quoting First Enoch. Everybody, I mean, they are.
Yeah.
This one, everybody doesn't agree the same thing, but I think that's what he's talking about. So Paul in 1 Corinthians 11.
Just verse 10 there, huh?
Yep, verse 10.
That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head because of the angels.
Because of the angels.
Interesting.
Okay? So Paul is saying, so the angels don't think that the women are tovot. They should have a symbol of authority on their head so that they know that they belong to a man. That's what Paul's saying.
Interesting.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's the interpretation of that. Because of the angels, the thing that Jude and Peter were talking about, the thing that Genesis 6 is talking about, the thing that 1 Enoch was talking about. Okay? And Paul has other references to things that happen in some of these Second Temple writings. We're not going to get into it right now. But a lot of the New Testament, and we're going to talk about how Jesus is talking about some of these things too later. All right, later when we conclude a lot of these things, we're going to read some passages where Jesus, one of his roles in his ministry, is taking back some of these places that these spiritual entities started. Okay? Okay. All right. This is another big argument about these spiritual entities. Okay, Matthew 22, because of what Jesus says. So let's talk about this. All right, let's read Matthew 22.
All right. But Jesus answered them, "You are wrong, because you know neither the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. And as for the resurrection of the dead, you have not read what was said to you by God. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living." And when the crowd heard it, they were astonished at his teaching.
Okay, so Jesus is arguing with the Pharisees who gave him this crazy... the Sadducees, I'm sorry. He was arguing with the Sadducees. They gave him this crazy thing about this woman whose husband died, and then she married her brother, and she married her brother. And he died, and she married his brother. He died, she married his brother. Who's in the reresurrection, because the Sadducees were... they didn't think there was a resurrection,
they were being
right?
Sarcastic, of course.
So in the resurrection, whose wife is she?
Yeah.
Okay. And Jesus is saying none of them, because there is no marriage.
Yeah.
Why? Okay. Why do we have marriage on the earth? It was to propagate the human race.
The dominion mandate.
Exactly. To be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, and subdue it. Our job was to take Edom, the perfection that God had, and take as imagers to take it to all the earth, right?
Yep.
That's why we have propagation through sexual relations, right? That's why we have that. Okay, but in heaven, in the age to come, in the spiritual age, we don't need that. No. There's no such thing as that. So is Jesus saying angels don't have the capability of having sexual relations?
No, he doesn't say that.
Does he say that at all?
No, he doesn't.
He says they don't need to.
Yeah.
So she's nobody's husband. She's nobody's wife.
Yeah.
All right? Okay? All right. Conclusion. Genesis 6, 1 through 4 is talking about men, right? No.
Yes.
It's talking about spiritual beings, these spiritual entities that rebelled against what God's will was. They wanted to create imagers for themselves, and they created these Nephilim. Okay? Yep. These Nephilim, through their DNA, became the Rephaim, the Zamzuzim, the Emim, the Anakim, the Amorites, maybe some of the Amalekites. Okay? We're going to see how that is in the Bible. All right?
Well, and the most famous giant of all time,
Goliath,
Mr. Goliath.
He's from Gath.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about what that means. Okay?
All right.
Okay. So let's read Numbers 13. We'll start there.
And they told him, "We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Enoch there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country. And the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan." But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it." Then the men who had gone up with him said, "We're not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are." So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land that they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that saw it are of great height." And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them.
So this is obviously the account in the Exodus of where the 12 spies go into the land that God promised to give them. Caleb and Joshua are the ones that say, yeah, let's go. Exactly. We can take it. But the 10 spies say, no, we can't. They are giants there. We can't take it.
Nope.
All right. So their lack of faith.
Cursed them 40 years.
They died in the desert. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So we talked about how the Septuagint translates Nephilim as gigantes, right?
Yeah.
And then mighty men, we talked about in Genesis 6, is giborim. It also translates that as giants also. Okay. Gigantes, okay? Some people think that this word Nephilim, we don't know exactly. There's different theories about the origin, the etymology of Nephilim. Okay, why does it mean giants? Why did the Septuagint writers translate it as gigantes? In some cases, in every case they don't necessarily, but in these cases we're talking about they do. Okay, why? Well, we don't know. There's lots of different possibilities. Some people, so we know that there's an Aramaic word, Nephila, okay, that means giants, okay? So a lot of people think it's kind of a way of reading back, because remember the Torah, the traditional view is that Moses wrote it, okay? And he probably wrote a lot of it, the ones that he's first-hand account where he was involved in it. He probably did write the vast majority and pass that information along. Some of it he wouldn't have known. He was either given it by God during the 40 years, or it was passed down to him even through Abram all the way down. But it was compiled for sure. We know it wasn't written. There wasn't like a document. He didn't carry around tablets with all the law. I mean, they carried the tablets of the 10 commandments, and they put those in the Ark of the Covenant, right? But they didn't carry around this book of the law. They didn't have paper they wrote, papyrus they wrote down on. They didn't have tablets that they carried around. So they passed it on orally. We've talked about that before, right?
Right.
But we know that all of the Torah was compiled starting at about 1000 BC. Okay. 1000 BC through the Babylonian captivity. All right. So in the Babylonian captivity, the people learned Aramaic, right? Because that was the language that they spoke there. So a lot of Aramaic words make their way back because these people are compiling it. So it's possible that Nephila is just they were using this word for giants, and the Septuagint writer said, "Oh yeah, that's the Aramaic word Nephila," and so we're going to use that as giant. We're going to translate that into Greek as gigantes. Okay, a lot of people think that's what happened. Okay, if I had to say one, I don't know. I'm not smart enough to figure all that stuff out. But that's what I would guess is the Nephila. Okay? All right. So it says in Genesis 6:4 that said the Nephilim were there in those days and also afterward, right? And so we see in Numbers 13 this link between the Anakim and the Nephilim. Okay? It's kind of an editorial comment saying that these were giants. Gotcha. Okay? The Nephilim had a reputation of being giants. Okay. All right, Anakim. So who are the Anakim that we just read about? The Anakim are descendants of this guy named Anak. Okay, Anak had 3 sons, Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai. Okay, Joshua later defeated the Anakim, devoting them to destruction. This really important concept in the Bible called haram. Haram. Okay?
Not haram, but haram.
Right.
Okay.
In Arabic, it would be haram, right? Because the chet and the ha are the same Semitic word letter.
Right.
Okay. So devoting to destruction is this concept of devoted to destruction is haram. The devotion to destruction is cherem. Okay. It's just different vowels and stuff. You say it differently depending on the context, right? So Joshua committed haram against these people, and left them in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. Those are a lot of the Philistine cities, right? We talked about that.
Correct.
1 Samuel 17:4 says that Goliath was from Gath, right? Gath. So it doesn't say explicitly he was a descendant of Anakim, but Anak, his descendants were were tall, and it says that Goliath was really tall. So we just assume that he is a descendant of these really tall people. Okay. So Caleb drove out and committed Haram against the Anakim from Hebron. Okay, this city of Judah, Caleb's Judahite, the city of Judah, okay, which is in the West Bank today. It was formerly known, and in Judges 14 and Judges 1, it says it was formerly known as Kiryat Arba. Kiryat in Hebrew just means city or town, okay?
Okay.
Kiryat Arba. Arba means?
I don't know.
What does it mean in Arabic?
It means 4.
Yeah, Arba.
Yeah. Oh,
4.
Okay.
So his name was 4. Why is his name 4? Because he's 4 times as big as a normal person. That's why his name is Arba, okay? So, Kiryat Arba, it's the city of Arba.
Yeah.
Okay, so Caleb conquered that. So Arba is a descendant of Anak, all right?
Yeah.
Arba means 4. He's 4 times as big as a normal person. Okay, if I go to McDonald's in Beersheba,
Yeah.
and I want a large size Coke,
Uh-huh.
I say, Coke Anak,
No way.
giant.
Giant.
I want a giant Coke. Anak means
That's hilarious.
giant. Okay, so they're called. His name is Anak because he is
Giant.
Okay,
I love that.
If the giants and the lamb came from Nephilim, how did this happen when the Nephilim were wiped out by the flood? All right, in Enoch, it describes that the flood is a judgment against men because of the evil perpetuated through these Nephilim.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what First Enoch is partly about. All right. So there's a few options.
Ooh, we're about to get even more controversial.
We're just going to mention these things.
Yes.
Okay, mention that there are options about why these Nephilim are here now in Genesis 6 and also afterwards, which we saw, which is after the flood, right?
Yeah.
It could be a local flood. A lot of people believe that it was just a flood locally.
Old early church. Augustine was local flood guy.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of guys were local flood guys, which is fine. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, I don't necessarily have an opinion. I will have an opinion. I'll tell you, I believe it's one of them, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's number one. Number two, the same thing happened again after the flood. So these watchers decided again that these daughters of men, these banot, were tovot. They were beautiful. They were good.
Yeah. Because the flood wouldn't have wiped out the fallen spiritual entities.
No, it would have only wiped out remember, they were punished. Enoch says they were punished and thrown in angel jail.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, which is what Peter and Jude said. They were thrown in angel jail. All right. How do you, it just blows my mind. How do you chain up a spiritual being?
Yeah,
anyway,
right.
God knows.
Of course, it's a
spiritual
it's
thing.
metaphorical. Yeah, exactly.
It's not metal that trains them up.
Exactly.
I mean, they would just slip right through it. Right.
Right. Like Casper.
Anyway, we digress.
Yeah.
So it happened again. It just doesn't make any sense. All right. These other beings see that these angels, these spiritual entities. I'm trying to be real careful about not calling them angels because we think of angels as in a different way, and Malachim are a different level of spiritual being. Right.
Yeah.
They're spiritual beings too, but they're a different level. Okay. These are watchers. These are higher B'nai Elohim. Okay. So these other B'nai Elohim see that
these other
Elohim got thrown in angel jail, and they decided they didn't want to do that. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense because they know the same thing's going to happen to them. God's going to see it. I mean, it's like, ooh, we're going to try to get away with something, and God's not going to see it. It just does. It's not logical. Most people don't believe that. Hardly anybody really believes that. Okay.
Option 3.
The third option is that the Nephilim genes were passed through the sons of the wives of Noah's sons. Okay, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, right? Those are his 3 sons, and they had wives, and their wives were brought on the ark with them, okay? Is it possible they had DNA from these Nephilim? Yeah, we don't know.
They weren't from
It doesn't say, because tradition says that the Hamites are through where a lot of the giant races can come from, okay? So Ham's wife might have had giant DNA, So anyway, we don't know. That's most likely to me, but I mean, it's the most logical to me. That's the one I would say if I had to guess, but I don't really know. Okay. Jewish tradition says that Og, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
That's a great giant name.
Yeah, it is. Og. My name, Og. I live on bed of iron. And a giant bed of iron, Og. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, all right? That Og, so Jewish tradition in the Talmud and other Midrashic writings And a lot of the rabbis say that Og survived the flood by holding on to the outside of the ark.
I mean,
Some people say that Og told Noah he would be a servant, and so he actually allowed him to have a little niche on the ark. You know, there's no biblical precedent for that. So,
No.
I mean, it's just people making stuff up. It's like, well, maybe this happened, or maybe that happened.
Right.
That's what they're saying. So,
right.
Og.
Goodness.
Maybe Og held on to the outside of the ark for all that time.
Yeah.
He had plenty of water. He could drink water anytime he wanted to.
That's true.
You know,
I mean,
he didn't have any food, so he would have lost a lot of weight. But
he could have grabbed a fish.
yeah, I guess so. All right. So we saw in Numbers 13 that Israel was afraid of the giants in the land of Canaan. Okay.
Yeah.
And it would have to be that later generation that would deal with these Anakim and other giants under Joshua's leadership. However, they still had to deal with giants while they were in the wilderness.
Yep.
Okay? And we're going to talk about Og of Bashan.
All right.
As Israel went up the way to Bashan, King Og came out against them for battle. All right? Let's read Deuteronomy 3,
Okay.
and then we'll talk about Og.
All right. I have to say it like that, though. Right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Then we turned and went up the way to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to me, do not fear him, for I have given him and all his people and his land into your hand, and you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon. So the Lord our God gave into our hand Og, also the king of Bashan and all his people, and we struck him down until he had no survivor left. And we took all his cities at that time. There was not a city that we did not take from them. 60 cities, the whole region of Argob, the king of Og in Bashan. So we took the land at that time out of the hand of the two kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians called Hermon Syrian, while the Amorites call it Senir. All the cities of the tableland, and all Gilead, and all Bashan, as far as Selecah and Edrei, cities of the king of Og and Bashan. For only Og the king of Bashan was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Amorites? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit.
So Og,
Yeah.
it describes his ally, Sihon. We're going to talk about him a little bit too later. Sihon was Amorite, so we're going to talk about the Amorites in a little bit. And then Og was the descendant of the Rephaim, right? That's what it says right here.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk. All right. So this place of Bashan, but let's talk about Og's how he may be a
He had a
giant
big
right
old bed.
now. Oh, yeah. So me Og, me sleep on bed of iron. It very big, 9 cubits.
I mean, it doesn't sound
4
very
cubits.
comfortable, though.
No, but he's a giant. He
That's
doesn't
true.
need
He don't
comfort.
care. He don't care.
All right.
So what about the cubits?
Cubit was 18 inches. Is 18 inches,
Yeah.
right? So Og's bed was 13 feet 6 inches long. All right. This suggests he was big. All right. Does that mean? I mean, you could have a giant 13 feet bed and not be a giant, and just
True.
you could be 5 feet tall and just sleep in this humongous
True.
bed, right? It's possible. So, but anyway, it says he was of the remnant of the Rephaim, and we'll talk about what that means in that. In Joshua 12:4 and 13:12, it says he was remnant of the Rephaim, which the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, translates as gigantos,
Giants.
right? Giants.
Yep.
All right. So who are the Rephaim? All right. We've talked about Nephilim.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's talk about who these Rephaim are. All right.
Another race of giants.
Rephaim is mentioned in our Genesis 14 passage, right?
Yep.
So we're gonna talk about that. Let's read Deuteronomy 2. We just read Deuteronomy 3. So let's go back to the next passage and read Deuteronomy 2.
Okay. And the Lord said to me, do not harass Moab or contend with them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land for possession, because I have given Ar to the people of Lot for possession. The Amim formerly lived there, a people great and many, and tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also counted as Rephaim, but the Moabites called them Amim. The Horites also lived in Seir formerly, but the people of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them from before them and settled in their place. And when you approach the territory of the people of Ammon, do not harass them or contend with them, for I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the sons of Lot for a possession. It is also counted as a land of Rephaim. Rephaim formerly lived there, but the Ammonites called them Zumzumim, a people great and many, and tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before the Ammonites, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place, as he did for the people of Esau, who live in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place, even to this day.
Okay, so we talk about these three different peoples: the Emim, the Zemzumim, and the Horim, the Horites. Right. So we're talking about these three people. The Lord says Moab calls these Rephaim that live there Emim. All right, who are the Moabites? They're descendants of Lot, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's what this passage is about. So these Emim are Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim. All right, it says they're tall.
Yep.
The Horites, it doesn't explicitly say they're tall, but they're talked about in with these other giants. So we assume that they're tall too. All right, the Horites were dispossessed by Esau, the people of Esau,
Yep.
in Edom, okay, in Seir. All right, so the Emim are Rephaim, and they were dispossessed by the Moabites. The Horim, the Horites, were tall. We assume that because of the context. And the people of Esau, the Edomites, dispossessed them. Okay? And then the Ammonites call these Zemzumim, which Genesis 14 says Zumim.
Yeah.
Okay? Were tall, and they were counted among the Rephaim and the Anakim. They're tall. But the Ammonites dispossessed them. Okay? So we have these three different people group that are from the Rephaim. Okay? But they were dispossessed by these people of Lot and Esau. Okay? So this region of Bashan contained the Rephaim, which it says that Og was Rephaim, and he was the king of Bashan. All right? Og was one of these Rephaim giants. Deuteronomy 3 makes this connection explicit. The rest of Gilad and Bashan, the kingdom of Og, that is all the region of Argob, I gave to the half tribe of Manasseh. Okay?
East of the Jordan, correct?
Right, yes. All that portion of Bashan is called the land of Rephaim. Now, part of Bashan is east of Jordan, part of it's west of the Jordan.
Gotcha.
Okay? Scripture calls this the land of the Rephaim, okay? And the valley of Rephaim, right? So that's Joshua 17:15, the land of Rephaim. The valley of Rephaim is Joshua 18:16, 2 Samuel 5:18, 2 Samuel 5:22, 23:13, 1 Chronicles 11:15, 14:9, and Isaiah 17:5, the valley of Rephaim, okay?
Got it.
Let's see what Psalm 68 says about Bashan.
O mountain of God, mountain of Bashan, O many-peaked mountain, mountain of Bashan. Why do you look with hatred, O many-peaked mountain, at the mount that God desired for his abode? Yes, where the Lord will dwell forever. The chariots of God are twice 10,000, thousands upon thousands. The Lord is among them. Sinai is now in the sanctuary. You ascended on high, leading a host of captives in your train, and receiving gifts among men, even among the rebellious, that the Lord God may dwell there. Blessed be the Lord, who daily bears us up. God is our salvation.
So obviously this is talking about Bashan and God reclaiming Bashan as his own. What is the mountain of Bashan? It's Har Hermon, Mount Hermon. Okay? Mount Hermon, the name means, remember we just talked about the concept of Haram and Haram. Hermon, the root is the same. It means forbidden. Okay? Forbidden mountain. That's what it means. All right?
Interesting.
Or forbidden is Arabic. It's
it is.
Devoted to destruction.
Yeah.
Okay, is what Hermon means. Okay, but we're going to see how God reclaims it. All right. So, and you also will notice that Paul in Ephesians quotes this passage also. You ascended on high, leading a host of captives in your train and receiving gifts among men.
Yeah, he did.
Yep. So Paul quotes this. All right.
So Bashan it's a place of darkness.
Yeah, it's a place of darkness. It's called the mountain of the gods. Okay, Har Elohim here in this passage in Psalm 68:15. So it could be translated as mountain of God or mountain of the gods.
Yep.
Okay. The Rephaim. So Og is Rephaim, and he is the king of this area called Bashan, which includes Mount Hermon. In that passage in Deuteronomy 3, we talked about he was the king of Mount Hermon. Okay.
Right.
So, but these Rephaim in other places in Scripture are translated in different ways. We translate them, they're considered to be, they're associated with Sheol, the place of the dead. They're associated to be inhabitants of Sheol, spirits of the dead. So let's read some of these passages and see how we translate that. Isaiah 14 first.
Sheol beneath is stirred up to meet you when you come. It rouses the shade to greet you. All who were leaders of the earth, it raises from their thrones all who were kings of the nations.
Okay, so Sheol, the land of the dead, is stirred. Remember, this is Isaiah 14. It's a passage about the king of Babylon. It's the taunt against the king of Babylon. They're talking trash to him. But we think that it's really talking about the spiritual being behind the king of Babylon.
Correct.
Right? So this king of Babylon wanted to ascend the mount of the assembly. Okay, the assembly where God is in his throne room, okay, and he wants to ascend, Har Moed, and to be like the Most High, El Elyon, okay? He wants to be like Elyon, okay? And so he's judged and is sent to Sheol, okay?
Yeah.
Sheol is stirred up to meet you when you come, when he's judged and thrown down. It rouses the shades to greet you. Shades is Rephaim. The Hebrew words are Rephaim. Shades, like spiritual dark ones, okay? All who were leaders of the earth, these dead ones, these dead kings, it raises from their thrones. All who were kings of the nations become these Rephaim, these shades. Okay, so these Rephaim are these kings who became these dead spiritual beings. Okay,
So the Hebrew word used for shades,
Rephaim.
interesting.
Yep.
That is not translated as that.
Nope. Isaiah 26:14.
They are dead. They will not live. They are shades. They will not arise. To that end, you have visited them with destruction and wiped out all remembrance of them. Your dead shall live. Their bodies shall rise.
They are dead. They will not live. They are Rephaim. They will not arise. To that end, you have visited them with Abaddon, destruction, and wiped all that remembrance of them. Your dead, Rephaim, shall live.
Wow.
Their bodies shall rise. Okay? Rephaim.
Yep.
Psalm 88.
Do you work wonders for the dead? Do the departed rise up to praise you? Is your steadfast love declared in the grave, or your faithfulness in Abaddon?
Do you work wonders for the dead, the Mot? Do the departed, Rephaim, rise up to praise you? Is your steadfast love declared in the grave of your faithfulness in the place of destruction, Abaddon? Departed, dead spirits,
Yep.
dead kings, just like in the other passages.
Yep.
Job 26.
The dead tremble under the waters and their inhabitants. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon has no covering.
The dead, Rephaim, tremble under the waters and their inhabitants. Sheol is naked before God, and Abaddon, the place of destruction, has no covering.
Interesting.
Proverbs 2.
For her house sinks down to death, and her paths to the departed.
Her house sinks down to the Mot, and her paths to the Rephaim. Proverbs 9.
He does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol.
But he does not know that the Rephaim are there, that her guests are the depths of Sheol. Proverbs 21.
One who wanders from the way of good sense will rest in the assembly of the dead.
One who wanders from the way of good sense will rest in the assembly of the dead. Michal, Rephaim, Noach. The assembly of the
That's pretty
Rephaim.
interesting.
Okay? The Rephaim in every one of these passages, we don't think about those things, but Rephaim is translated as dead or departed or shades or something like that. All right? They are the kings that went down to Sheol. They're the dead kings in Sheol. Okay? They're distinguished from other dead beings here, right? As you can see in these passages.
Correct.
So they're said to rise to greet this king of Babylon when he sinks down to Sheol after he is judged, okay? The false gods that the Israelites worship sometimes in Isaiah 26 are described as dead Rephaim that will not rise. The psalmist asks whether the dead ones, these departed Rephaim, will rise up to praise God. Other passages highlight Rephaim as inhabitants of Sheol and dead ones and shades and things like that. All right. So Rephaim are giants. They're counted among the Anakim, as we saw in some of these passages. They're also the supernatural kings that reside in the realm of the dead. Okay. This area of Bashan, by these Second Temple Jews, which includes Jesus and the apostles, Bashan is is seen to be as the realm of the dead, the gates of hell. Okay? Deuteronomy 2:10 says that these Emim were tall as Anakim, but also the Anakim and the Emim were also counted as Rephaim. That's important because it links the Anakim with the Rephaim. Okay? Og was one of the last of the Rephaim. All right? There were still Rephaim in the land, the Anakim, that we talked about in 2 Samuel 21, 18, 20, and 22. Okay?
Right.
So, Rephaim are important. Okay? And Bashan is important. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Who are the Amorites? So let's read Genesis 15 and see what is revealed to Abram. We're going to read that in a few weeks in one of our podcasts, we'll revisit this. But let's talk about it right now.
Okay, so we're on our third race of giants here. Know for certain that your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and will be servants there, and they will be afflicted for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and shall be buried in a good old age. And they shall come back here in the fourth generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete.
So these Amorites are the ones that dwell in this land. Okay?
Right.
All right? God told Abram that his descendants would live in bondage, but they were returned to this land when the iniquity of the Amorites has reached a point where God was going to judge them. Okay? So Sihon, we talked about Sihon was an Amorite king in Deuteronomy 3:2. We talked about him in a little while. But why is that significant? Well, the historical material on the Amorites is sparse. We don't really know a whole lot about them. We talked about before that the Amorite, from the Mesopotamian perspective, it comes from a Sumerian word martu. We talked about that before. It means those guys that came from the west, okay? Yeah. The west of Mesopotamia. So it's kind of a generic term that's used for all the population of Canaan. Okay, Amorites and Canaanites are kind of interchangeable. Okay, you know, like in Genesis 15, we talked about that. So they're kind of the generic term, Amorites, to be used as the enemies of Israel as they're conquering the land. Okay, so they don't always use Canaanite. Sometimes it says Canaanites, or it describes it like specific races of people, but a lot of times it just talks about Amorites in general. Okay. It takes on this Babylonian polemic. Again, the word Amorite is it's Sumerian. Okay, so it takes on this Babylonian polemic. Okay, that precedes the point in Israel's story here. Okay, so it has a profound theological effect, but connections more direct. Okay, one passage in Amos directly connects the Amorites to these Nephilim. So let's read Amos 2.
Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorites before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and who was as strong as the oaks. I destroyed his fruit above and his roots beneath. Also, it was I who brought you up out of the land of Egypt and led you 40 years in the wilderness to possess the land of the Amorites. Okay,
so these Amorites that he's talking about are, again, it's a generic term for the people in Canaan, but he's saying they're tall. They're giants. That's what Amos is saying, all right? And that they were dispossessed by the people of Israel. It was a judgment on them by the Lord, okay? So obviously the context of this is the Exodus and the conquest, okay? So these Amorites were tall, and to the Israelites, that means they think that they were descendant from the Nephilim, okay? Numbers 13, just like what we read about earlier. This wasn't just a battle for the land. It was a battle between God and his people and those fallen watchers and their people, their descendants, okay? So the ones who are imagers of the Lord, of Yahweh, versus the imagers of those fallen ones who disobeyed God. Yeah. That's what this was. This battle for the land, the conquest was that. And we're going to get into that a whole lot later when we talk about the Exodus and the conquest, okay? All right. So something about Sihon. We read, remember we read that passage in Deuteronomy 3 about Sihon. He was allied with Og, and that they conquered Og, who was an Amorite king, and then they conquered Og, who was the giant king, right? Okay. Let's read Deuteronomy 3 one more time, just so we can remind ourselves exactly what it says.
We turned up and went away to Bashan, and Og, the king of Bashan, came out against us, he and all his people, to battle at Edrei. But the Lord said to me, do not fear him, for I have given him and all his people and his land into your hand. And you shall do to him as you did to Sihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon. So the Lord our God gave into our hand Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people, and we struck him down until he had no survivor left. And we devoted them to destruction, as we did to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, devoted to destruction every city, men, women, and children. But all the livestock and the spoil we took as our plunder. So we took the land at that time out of the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan, from the valley of the Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sidonians called Hermon Sirion, and the Amorites called it Senir. All the cities of the tableland and all the Gilead and all Bashan, as far as Salek and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan. For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim. Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the Ammonites? 9 cubits was its length, 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit.
Okay. So, when someone who has a view of looking back in history to Mesopotamia, and they hear Og, this giant, was dispossessed and killed. His land of Bashan was taken by the conquering Israelites, right? Mm-hmm. So Og's bed and its dimensions, 9 by 4 cubits, they're exactly the same dimensions as the cultic bed in the ziggurat called a Tinmenaki. Okay? So a lot of archaeologists, when they found this ziggurat, they identified that with the Tower of Babel. So this cultic bed is where Marduk every year would ritually bless the land with his ritual cultic behavior with his wife. Okay? Once a year, that's what Marduk would do. So, is this the Tower of Babel? Is Og related to this cult of Marduk? Maybe. Okay? Okay, so a lot of people would think, wow, that's the same as that Tower of Babel ziggurat. Maybe. Og's a giant. Okay? He's said to be the last of the Rephaim. It's a term connected. It connects the Rephaim and the Anakim. We just read all those passages. And other giant clans, the Emim, the Zamzumim, the Horim. Okay? Marduk, like other deities in antiquity, was also portrayed as a giant. Yeah. Okay? This is polemic based on Babylonian mythology. All right, so what this is it's an argument showing that God and his people and his image bearers are destroying those image bearers of those false gods, of those false gods. That's what he's saying. All right, so by destroying Sihon and Og and dispossessing all these giant clans, God is taking back his land, his mountains, whatever, all the things, and saying that my people, my image bearers are the ones that are going to possess this land. They're the ones I'm going to bless through Abram, okay? And we're going to get back to Abram in just a little bit. We still got to talk about some of these other people could do, okay? Okay, so we mentioned the city of Edrei, okay? We talked about that, all right? Joshua 12, let's read that real quick.
Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived at Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is on the edge of the valley of the Arnon, and from the middle of the valley as far as the river Jabbok, the boundary of the Ammonites, that is, half of Gilead and the Arabah to the sea of Chinneroth eastward, and in the direction of Beth Jesimoth to the sea of the Arabah, the Salt Sea, southward to the foot of the slopes of Pisgah. And Og, the king of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Rephaim, who lived at Ashtaroth and at Edrei, and ruled over Mount Hermon and Salakah and all Bashan, to the boundary of the Geshurites and the Maccathites, all and over half of the Gilead, to the boundary of Sihon, king of Heshbon. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the people of Israel defeated them, and Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave their land for possession to the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh.
So Joshua's looking back on after that Moses started this, as they went along, they defeated these giant clans, okay? Correct. It's God beginning to reclaim his land from those image bearers of the fallen watchers and claim it for his people, his image bearers, okay, and his chosen people, okay? These terms, Ashtaroth, Edrei, Bashan, okay, they're loaded okay? Because they are the ones these are places of cultic worship of other gods.
Yeah.
They're giants who worship other gods. They're semi-divine kings, Rephaim, okay, who worship these cultic gods, okay? And these places became really important cultic worship sites, okay? So in Ugaritic, which is that language of that they've discovered, Bashan is actually pronounced Bafan. And you know what that means? That means serpent. Bafan means serpent. So it's Bashan means place of the serpent. Okay?
And
what does that make you think of?
How many religions throughout ancient history include serpent worship and cultic practices like human sacrifice? And
there's so many. They're so similar.
Yeah.
Worship of these serpent type gods.
Yep.
Human sacrifice,
Yep.
and that's the unholy triad.
Yeah.
And sometimes using drugs and especially psychedelic type drugs in your cultic practices. Right.
It's all throughout history.
Right. So this Bashan became thought of, and the caves around Hermon became a gate to hell, gate to the underworld. That's what it was known as. Okay. So when they were using these cities, these cultic cities, were these Ashtaroth. Who's that? That's the goddess. This city is named after the cultic god Ashtaroth, right? Astarte, Ishtar, it's the same goddess, right? The same god that goddess that we talk about all throughout the Bible. That city's named after.
Yeah.
Edrei was important cultic city. So in this area of Bashan near Mount Hermon, it's considered to be the gates of hell.
Yeah.
Okay. There's in Jesus' time, in the apostles' time, Second Temple time, there's this temple to Zeus. At Caesarea Philippi, it's a temple to Pan, the half goat god.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And so this area is known as the gates of hell. All right. And so in that context is what Bashan is. All right. And so when we talk about these cities, these cultic worship practices of these other gods, with that unholy triad, the land of the serpent, the land of Bashan, that's who Og was the king of. And he was getting dispossessed by God's people, his image bearers, to destroy those image bearers of those fallen watchers. Okay? That's what these giants are. All right? Jesus.
Right. So if you've been listening, you've heard gates of hell many times. So that should make you think of a very important
Jesus
text.
Talked about this.
Yeah.
And part of his ministry was reclaiming and claiming authority once and for all over these enemies.
Yeah.
Okay. These Rephaim are long gone, but the cultic practices we talked about in his day, there was the temple of Zeus, same thing. The temple to Pan, same thing. There's these same gods propagated, and this cultic practice is propagated over and over and over. Aphrodite is Ishtar. She has a lot of the same qualities as Ishtar and Ashtaroth, okay? So let's read Matthew 16 and see what Jesus says about this. And this is a little controversial too, okay? Everything today we're talking about is controversial, and that's okay. And if you don't like it, I'm not trying to offend you. I just think this is what the Bible's saying. So Matthew 16.
Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven."
Jesus and his disciples are at Caesarea Philippi,
Yeah.
in this land of Bashan, okay? Bathan,
Yeah.
the land of the serpent,
Yeah.
where all these cultic practices to other gods have been happening for thousands of years,
Yeah.
okay? And so he says, and listen, if you look at the map, Caesarea Philippi is right next to Mount Hermon. So he's at Mount Hermon with his disciples, and he says, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. You are the Messiah, the one that's prophesied about, that God said he was going to send to make everything right." Right?
Yeah.
You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. The Son of God, B'nai Elohim, the one, Ben, not B'nai Elohim, the one, Ben Elohim, the one Son of God.
Yeah.
Okay, those others are sons of God, but they were created by this one
Exactly.
to whom he's talking.
And Jesus was not created. Praise God.
Right?
Yeah.
There were these other B'nai Elohim were created by this Ben Elohim,
Yeah.
the one that created them, right?
Correct.
And Peter is confessing that. You are this guy. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, for God revealed this to you, right? And on this rock,
right.
I'm reclaiming Psalm 68,
So we're
this
not,
mountain of God.
the rock is not Peter.
The rock is not Peter. The rock is this new kingdom being reclaimed for God at this rock, this mountain. Psalm 68, it's Psalm 68.
It's fulfillment of that. Correct.
It's fulfillment of Psalm 68, okay? I will build my church, and the gates of hell.
Or of Bashan.
The gates of hell, this place will not prevail. This place is the realm of the dead. It's where these Rephaim live. It's the portal to the underworld.
And these Jewish disciples would have known exactly what he's talking about.
They knew exactly what he was talking about. And these gates of hell will not prevail against it. It's offensive. This church is offensive. We're taking it to them.
Yeah.
All right. The gates of hell will not prevail. We're taking it to them right now. And the keys to the kingdom of heaven are given to you. And whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in
heaven.
So he's given them authority in earth and heaven.
Yep.
And whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. The gifts from Psalm 68, he's giving to his people.
Yep.
Okay? That's what he's doing. Mount Hermon is in Bashan. It's called the gates of hell. Jesus is reclaiming his mountain, and he's giving his followers power to reclaim his victory. He's sharing these gifts, these spoils of victory with us, with them, and with us. That's what he's doing. Okay? And then right after that, what does he do? Matthew 17.
After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John his brother and led them up a
high mountain
by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. And behold, there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. And Peter said to Jesus, Lord, it is good that we are here. If you wish, I will make 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. He was still speaking when, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. When the disciples heard this, they fell on their faces and were terrified.
Wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
He reclaimed it. He is being glorified right before their very eyes, and Moses and Elijah can come in and talk to him now.
Which is wild.
All right? So it's on this same rock where he establishes his church. It's Jesus as the Son who has made the Father pleased.
Yep.
All right? Who is reclaiming this territory, fulfilling Psalm 68, and receives his glorification there. And the disciples see it. And they're like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
They were terrified. And Peter, never afraid to share his opinion, always has to talk. There's always that guy who always just says something, whatever it is. Sometimes it's the right thing, like in the previous passage. Sometimes it's the wrong thing, which is right here. Just shut up, Peter. Sometimes you just got to learn to shut up. All right. But anyway, I'll make 3 tents for you, 3 tabernacles. And he's just ignored, obviously.
But also it's interesting because God reveals himself in a similar way that he did in Exodus through a cloud.
On the mountain.
On the mountain.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
This Jesus is Yahweh, and he's being glorified and revealing himself to these 3 guys who get to see it. And he's talking to Moses and Elijah. And it's amazing.
It is amazing.
Because he has just reclaimed all this territory, fulfilling Psalm 68, okay, from these Rephaim, okay, in the place of the serpent and the gates of hell.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're almost done. Who are the Amalekites? Well, we're not almost done, but who are the Amalekites? Well, the Amalekites, they're traced back to Genesis 36, where Timnah, who is a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son, bore Amalek. Okay, Timnah was a Horite. Remember we talked about them. Horites were those giant cave dwellers that lived at Seir. Okay, and they were dispossessed by the Edomites, by the people of Esau. And they're described as giants or Rephaim in Deuteronomy 2 and Exodus 13, the Amalekites. This narrative aligns with the description in Numbers 13, where the formidable presence of the inhabitants of the land, these giants, who are the sons of Anak. And we just read that, so we're not going to read that again. But it's the spies. They go, they see the giants. They're scared, except for Caleb and Joshua. Caleb's like, yeah, let's go. We can get them, which he does later. Remember?
He does, yeah.
Okay. So let's read Exodus 17 and talk about what happened with the Amalekites and why they're the enemies of Israel.
Okay. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephaim. So Moses said to Joshua, "Choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand." So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun, and Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Write this as a memorial in a book, and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And Moses built an altar and called the name of it, "The Lord is my banner," saying, "A hand upon the throne of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation."
So some people think these Amalekites are giants also.
Yeah.
Okay. No matter what, they're the enemies of Israel. And we'll see it with Saul. We'll see it in the story of Esther. I mean, these Amalekites keep popping up over and over again as the enemies of Israel. And they've come to represent kind of anyone who is kind of anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-people of God. Okay? All right. So let's go back to Genesis 14 for just a second. King C defeated the Rephaim and Ashtroth Karnaim, the Zuzim and Ham, the Emim and Shaveh Kiriathaim, the Horites and Seir, in addition to defeating the Amalekites and the Amorites. So it seems that King C fought all these giant groups, okay?
Yep. The Rephaim, the Zuzim, the Emim.
The Horites, the Amorites, the Amalekites. Okay. So on the way, he's fighting these giants and defeating them, all right? So what does that say about King C and his allies? They're weak militarily, or are they pretty strong militarily?
Pretty strong.
They're really strong because they've defeated. It's not just one group. They're like Joshua and the Israelites. They've defeated people after people after people of these giants. Okay, so let's review. They defeated the Rephaim. They're the giants of Bashan. We just talked about that. Rephaim. And they're considered kings of the underworld too, right? We talked through all those passages. They defeated the Zamzumim or the Zumim in Ammon. They defeated the Emim, the giants in Moab. They defeated the Horites, the cave-dwelling giants in Edom. And they defeated the Amorites, the Semitic Martu western giants. And they defeated the Amalekites, who may have been giants also, the enemies of Israel. So they this guy and his people defeated all these.
Tough.
They defeated all these people.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back. So they then the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that's Zoar, went out and they joined battle against these guys in the valley of Siddim, right? With King C, king of Elam, Tidal, the king of Goim, Amraphel, and Arioch, king of Elasar. The five kings, the Sodom and Gomorrah alliance versus King C and his alliance, right?
Okay.
The valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits. And so King C and his guys, the four, they defeat them. All right, so they're beating them, they're routing them. And so Sodom and the king of the alliance of Sodom and Gomorrah, they flee. All right, and as they flee, they fall into the bitumen pits. Okay, and then the rest flee to the hill country. So verse 11, so the enemy, King C and his guys, took possession of Sodom and Gomorrah, all their provisions, and went their way. So among them were Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. Okay, so as we learned in Genesis 12, when Abram was called, and he left Mesopotamia and came west, right? He brought Lot with him. And so their possessions became great. And in Genesis 13, Lot and Abram's people were fighting because they had too much possessions, too many goats and sheep and animals to graze.
Yeah.
And so Abram says, hey, listen, you can choose wherever you want to go. And Lot chooses to go to this valley of Siddim, where Sodom and Gomorrah and these other cities are. Okay. Very fertile. It wasn't where the Dead Sea wasn't the Dead Sea back then. Okay. Right. It was very fertile. All right. So Lot went there and he settled there in that area. That's why he ends up in Sodom, right? And so Abram goes to Beersheba. So to the west. Okay. So Lot gets taken possession as the king of Sodom and Gomorrah loose. All right. So he's a slave now. All right. Verse 12, they took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and they went their way. All right. Verse 13. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram, the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner. They were allies of Abram. All right. So Abram was friends with some of the Amorites. All right. Obviously, some of the Amorites weren't bad. They were, Mamre was friends with Abram. So Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, Lot. He led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. Okay. So.
Where's Dan?
Dan is kind of north.
Okay.
Okay. It's kind of north. Bashan. It's where Bashan. Yeah.
Okay.
So, King C defeats all these 5 kings. So on the way, he had defeated all these giants.
Yeah.
So this dude can fight.
Yeah.
All right. His guys can fight. They're battle trained. They've been fighting a lot of wars. They know how to fight. And so Abram's chilling with his 318 guys, raising their sheep and just living in the land, doing the things that normal people do. He hasn't been fighting.
No.
He's not well trained in battle and war. There's no evidence of that. We don't see anything of that in the Bible.
Right.
All right. So this battle-hardened army of 4 kings that had defeated all these giant clans, okay, and just defeated Sodom and Gomorrah and the 5 kings and taken off all their plunder, including Lot and his family. Abram says, "All right, I'm going to take my 318 guys and I'm going to go beat them." It doesn't make any sense.
It's wild, yeah.
How in the world is Abram and 318 guys going to defeat
this huge army?
This army with 4 kings and their armies,
Yeah.
and take back the plunder? He had faith.
Yeah.
He knew that the Lord was going to deliver him, right? It just blows my mind.
It is, yeah.
I wouldn't have done that. I couldn't have done that. My faith is so weak. I don't have the mustard seed.
Same.
So anyway, as far as Dan, verse 15, and he divided his forces against them by night, he and his servants. There's only 318 of them.
That's right.
And they defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. All right, Damascus is in Syria, right? So we're a little bit north and to the east of Israel there, where modern-day Israel is, where Dan was. Then he brought back all the possessions, and he also brought back Lot with his possessions and the women and the people. So, after all this happened, Abram goes and he defeats this great army of 4 kings that are battle-hardened, that have defeated the giants, that have defeated these 5 kings, and with 318 guys, at night, he goes and he defeats them, and he takes back all their stuff and sends them packing back to the east. Did Abram do that by himself? I mean, it doesn't say in this passage that God intervened, but how in the world could Abram and 318 guys beat them unless there's some kind of divine intervention?
Yeah.
Okay.
Has to.
But he had faith. Why did he have faith? Because of Genesis 12.
Yeah.
When God said, I will bless you, and you will be a blessing.
And a great nation.
And a great nation.
Yeah.
I will accomplish these things through you. And he had faith in that.
Yeah.
And we're going to see in chapter 15 in a few weeks, I don't know how many weeks, but it might be a while at this rate. But he will accomplish these things. And Abram believed it. And he said, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to win because God will accomplish these things in my life. I have faith and I believe and I will, and he will do that. And the next time we're going to meet this guy named Melchizedek. Abram takes the plunder, including Lot, and he comes on the way to this place called Solemn or Shalom, where he meets this mysterious guy named
Very mysterious.
Melchizedek, and we'll see what happens then.
Awesome. Great episode. Learned a lot about giants.
Lots of giants.
And the faith of Abraham to defeat the king who defeated the giants.
With only 318 guys.
Yeah. Appreciate it, Nathan. Thank you again.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thank you guys for listening. And as always, hit us up in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with what we said. We don't care.
It's okay. It's okay.
We
just say what we think the scripture's
We like
saying.
to have communication with you. So like us, subscribe on your favorite platform, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with another Covenants and Kingdoms. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Lord bless you. Thank you.